My beloved child, something happened last night. It did not happen in a loud way. There was no thunder in the sky. No shaking ground. No big crowd to see it. It happened in a quiet room, inside a quiet heart, where truth had been waiting far too long. A message was sent. Not to the world. Not to everyone. Just to one soul who has been carrying love like a secret flame. And the moment that message left their hands, everything changed. Yet the full meaning of it is still moving through the dark, another layer. For so long, you have wondered why some people circle back in your life at the very end of a long silence. Why they vanish, then return with eyes full of regret. Why the heart can feel one thing while the mouth says something else. Last night was one of those moments. Someone who truly loves you finally stopped fighting the truth. They admitted what had been hiding behind pride, fear, and time. But here is the part that matters most: they do not know if they are already too late. The biggest truth is still hidden. You may think this story is about them. It is not only about them. It is about the space you made in your own heart while waiting for what never came. It is about the nights you stayed strong when no one knew you were hurting. It is about the soft hope you kept alive even after disappointment touched everything. That hope was never foolish. It was preparing you for this very moment. Still, the door has not opened all the way. You'll understand soon. The first sign came before midnight. A name appeared on a screen. Then disappeared. Then returned again. 3 times. Each time, the same person stared at the same words, unable to press send, unable to walk away. Their chest felt tight. Their hands were shaking. They knew this was the moment they had avoided for months, maybe longer. And when they finally spoke, they did not begin with a grand speech. They began with honesty. Simple. Raw. Almost trembling. But what followed was not the ending anyone expected. Another piece. They said they had been carrying one thought again and again. That every time they tried to move on, your memory came back with a strange piece they could not explain. Not pain first. Peace. The kind that makes a person stop in the middle of a crowded life and ask, why does this still matter? That question can change everything. Yet even after they admitted it, they still did not know what you would do next. And that is where the story turns softly, the next layer. There is something sacred about a truth that arrives late. Not because late is ideal, but because late truths are often the most honest ones. They have been tested by silence, pressed by distance, held in the dark until they can no longer pretend. Last night, that kind of truth stepped forward. No one clapped. No one celebrated. It was just there. Bare and real. And for one brief second, the whole world seemed to pause around it. The meaning is still unfolding. Before I continue, If this message is touching your heart, you are welcome to support this work with a super thanks, only if it feels right for you. Now, let's continue. After that, the room became very still. That kind of stillness is never empty. It is full of words nobody knows how to say. It is full of memories that keep looking back. It is full of all the times they almost reached out, but chose fear instead. And maybe you know that feeling too. Maybe you have stood on the edge of a moment and felt your own courage leave the room. If so, then you already understand why this matters. There is more under the surface. Another truth: they remembered your kindness first. Not your face. Not your voice. Your kindness. That says a lot. Because kindness is what remains when everything else is stripped away. It is what lingers in the soul after time has taken its share. They said they had told themselves many times that the feeling would pass. But it did not pass. It deepened. It waited. It grew quieter, not smaller. And that quiet is often how the strongest truths live. One more piece. You may be asking why they waited so long. Why now? Why after so much distance, so many half-finished conversations, so many almosts? The answer is not simple, but it is honest. Sometimes the heart takes longer than the mind. Sometimes pride sits between two souls like a locked door. Sometimes people do not lose love. They lose courage. And last night, courage returned just enough to speak. But speaking is not the same as arriving. That is the tension still hanging in the air. You'll understand soon. What they wrote was not polished. It was not smooth. It was not the kind of message someone crafts to look perfect. It was real enough to shake them. They said they had tried to forget. They said they had tried to be strong. They said they had tried to live as if what they felt had no name. But the name was still there. Waiting. Breathing. Refusing to disappear. And once the truth is named, it cannot be unseen again. The question now is what happens when the other heart reads it. Another layer. Maybe you have been in that place where your heart almost knew something before your mind did. A pause that felt too heavy. A glance that stayed too long. A silence that said more than words ever could. That is what makes this moment so tender. It is not only about confession. It is about recognition. The feeling of, so this was real. Yet even recognition can hurt when timing stands in the way. And timing, at this point, is the shadow no one wants to face. The biggest truth is still hidden. The message did not ask for control. That is what makes it different. It did not demand a reply. It did not ask for promises. It only admitted the truth that had been denied for too long. I should have said this sooner. Those words carried more weight than 1,000 perfect speeches. Because regret sounds like that. Soft. Human. Honest. And when regret is honest, it can open a door the heart thought was gone forever. But whether that door stays open is another question entirely, another piece. You can almost feel the moment before the answer arrives. That strange breath between two decisions. That narrow space where everything can still change. One person is waiting. Another is remembering. And between them is a long road built from missed chances, unfinished conversations, and things never said at the right time. Yet even now, there is a softness in the air. Not because the story is finished. Because something inside it has finally started to heal. The next turn is still coming. What makes this even more moving is that the confession did not come with certainty. It came with humility. It came with the truth that sometimes love wakes up only after it has been tested by loss. Not all loss is final. Some loss is a mirror. It shows the heart what it nearly let go. And last night, that mirror was impossible to ignore. The person on the other side of the message finally saw what had been standing in front of them all along. But seeing is not the same as knowing what to do next, another layer. There is a kind of pain that only appears when a person realizes how much they left unsaid. It is not loud. It does not need to be. It sits in the chest and breathes slowly. It follows every thought. It asks, "What if I had been brave sooner?" That question can break a person open. But sometimes, being broken open is the only way light can get in. And this story is moving toward that kind of light. Even now, you'll understand soon. If you have ever loved someone from a distance, then you know how strange hope can feel. It can be warm and painful at the same time. It can keep you going and keep you awake. It can make one small message feel larger than 1,000 words. That is the feeling last night carried. A small moment. A huge meaning. A heart finally telling the truth after too much silence. Yet the reply has not been revealed. And that is where the tension remains. One more piece. The silence after the message was almost louder than the message itself. Because once truth is spoken, the next sound matters. A pause can mean fear. It can mean tears. It can mean someone is trying not to fall apart. It can also mean the heart is gathering courage for its own answer. And that answer may change everything. Or it may change nothing. Or maybe, just maybe, it may change just enough to begin again. The biggest truth is still hidden. Last night did not end the story. It uncovered it. There is a difference. Ending is final. Uncovering is sacred. It means the layers are still being lifted. It means the wound, the hope, the waiting, and the love are all still alive somewhere beneath the surface. That is why this moment feels so heavy. Because what was hidden is now impossible to deny. But what comes next has not yet been spoken aloud, another layer, so listen closely to this feeling. Not the fear. Not the doubt. The feeling beneath them. The one that says the heart was never completely gone. The one that says some connections do not die when time is unkind. They sleep. They wait. They whisper through dreams, through memories, through unexpected moments when no one is watching. And last night, one of those whispers became a voice. The story is still open, you'll understand soon. There is a reason this message felt different from every other passing thought. It was not casual. It was not random. It was not made of empty words. It came from the place people hide when they are afraid of being seen. And when a person risks being seen, they are giving you something precious. Not certainty. Not a promise. Something rarer. Truth. But truth asks for a reply, and that reply has not yet arrived. One more piece. Maybe that is why your heart feels so still right now. It senses the edge of something important. It knows that some moments do not rush. They stand at the doorway and wait to be understood. That is what last night became. A doorway. Not a conclusion. Not a finish line. Just a door that finally opened enough to let the light in. Yet the room beyond it is still waiting in shadow. The biggest truth is still hidden, and maybe the deepest part is this. The person who finally admitted their feelings may not be asking for the past. They may be asking for a future they were too scared to reach for before. But a future can only be born when the heart is ready to hear what the soul has been trying to say all along. That answer is still traveling. It has not landed yet. The pause is growing longer. The air is heavier. And somewhere beyond that silence, another message is coming. Another layer. So do not think this was a simple confession. It was a turning point. It was a quiet storm. It was the kind of truth that arrives with tears in its hands. And when truth arrives like that, it leaves a mark. It changes the shape of what comes next. But the next part has not been shown to you yet. It is still waiting behind the closed door of one final choice. And that choice is closer than you know. You'll understand soon. The last thing they said before the night went still was not dramatic at all. It was almost soft enough to miss. They wrote that they were afraid the moment had already passed. Afraid the heart they loved had moved on. Afraid they had waited until the old light was gone. That one sentence held everything. Longing. Regret. Hope. Fear. And behind it all, a love that refused to disappear. But what came after that sentence was stranger than silence, another piece, because somewhere, in the same dark hour, another phone lit up. Another heart woke. Another soul saw the message and did not answer right away. That is where we must stop for now, because the next breath of this story holds the kind of truth that changes everything, but only if you are ready to hear what was written back in the darkness, the final piece. The screen stayed lit for only a few seconds, then it grew dark again. No answer came, not because the message had been ignored. Not because the heart on the other side did not care. Something much quieter was happening. A single sentence had awakened memories that had been sleeping for a very long time, and those memories refused to hurry. Another layer. The person who received the message looked at every word more than once, not searching for mistakes, searching for courage. Sometimes the hardest thing is not speaking. Sometimes the hardest thing is believing what you finally hear. For so long, they had trained themselves to expect silence. Now honesty had arrived without warning. How could one heart trust what it had waited so long to hear? That question settled gently into the room, and the answer did not appear. Not yet. The biggest truth is still hidden. Outside, the night seemed ordinary. Cars passed. Lights faded from distant windows. The world kept moving as if nothing important had happened. Yet inside two hearts, everything felt different. It is strange how life works. The biggest moments rarely make the loudest sound. They arrive softly, almost unnoticed, like a candle being lit inside a dark house. You do not hear the flame. You only notice that the darkness is no longer the same. But another mystery was quietly unfolding. The one who confessed their feelings could not sleep. Every few minutes they reached for the phone, then placed it back down, again and again. Not because they expected an instant reply, because every passing minute felt like another lifetime. Hope has a way of stretching time. 1 minute can feel like 1 hour. 1 hour can feel like an entire season. Still, nothing appeared on the screen. Another piece. Meanwhile, the one who received the message sat beside a window. They remembered something they had almost forgotten. A conversation from long ago. A simple laugh. A promise that had never really become a promise. At the time, it seemed small. Now it felt enormous. Funny how memory changes. It does not always grow weaker. Sometimes it grows clearer, especially when truth finally knocks. Yet that memory was pointing towards something even deeper. You'll understand soon. There was one sentence in the message that would not leave their mind. I never stopped wondering about you. Simple words. Nothing dramatic. Nothing perfect. Yet those few words carried years inside them. Years of silence. Years of questions. Years of pretending everything was fine. Could such simple words really carry so much? Perhaps. But perhaps they carried even more than either heart realized. Another layer. Many people believe love disappears. When enough time passes, sometimes that happens, sometimes it does not. Sometimes love changes shape instead. It becomes quieter, gentler, less demanding, more patient, like a river flowing beneath winter ice. Hidden, but never gone. Could this be one of those stories? No one knows yet. The answer is still waiting beyond the next bend. Another truth. As the hours slipped away, both hearts were asking different questions. One wondered, did I ruin my chance forever? The other wondered, can I trust this now? Neither question had an easy answer. Because real healing is never rushed, real forgiveness cannot be forced. Real love cannot be commanded, it can only be welcomed, and welcoming takes courage. Even now, the door has only opened a little farther. Another piece. Then something unexpected happened. Not a reply, not a phone call, not a surprise visit. Something quieter. The one who received the message smiled, only for a moment, a small smile, barely visible, but completely real. It appeared without permission, as though the heart remembered happiness before the mind gave approval. That tiny smile changed everything, not because it solved the story, because it proved hope was still alive. Yet hope alone cannot finish what fear began. The next layer remains hidden. There are moments when silence speaks with astonishing clarity. This was one of them. No words, no promises, just breathing, thinking, remembering. Sometimes heaven whispers through quiet moments because loud moments leave no room to listen. Maybe that is why nothing happened immediately. Maybe the pause itself carried meaning. But whose meaning? That question is still waiting. The one who confessed their feelings walked outside before sunrise. The air felt cool. The streets were empty. Everything looked ordinary. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. They realized something important. For the first time in a long time, they were no longer hiding. Whatever happened next, the truth had finally been spoken. That alone brought unexpected peace, not complete peace, but enough to keep breathing, enough to keep hoping, enough to face another sunrise. Still, the greatest lesson had not yet appeared. Another layer, far away, the other heart whispered something almost no one else heard. Not into a phone, not into the night, only into the silence. I always wondered why you left. That question had lived there for so long, long enough to become part of everyday life. Yet hearing the confession made that old question return with fresh meaning. Perhaps they never truly knew why the distance began. Perhaps the story had always been missing one page, and that missing page is still hidden. What if both hearts spent years believing different stories? One believed they were unwanted, the other believed they had waited too long. One believed silence meant rejection, the other believed silence meant protection. How many lives are changed by misunderstandings that never get spoken aloud? Far more than people realize, and this story may be asking that very question. But another mystery has just appeared. The first light of morning slowly entered the room. Nothing magical, nothing impossible, just dawn doing what dawn has always done. Yet the sunlight landed on the phone resting beside the window. The screen remained dark, still no answer. Strangely, that no longer felt frightening. Because something inside had already begun changing. Sometimes healing begins long before conversations do. Sometimes forgiveness begins before apologies are finished. Could that be happening now? No one can say for certain. The answer continues to hide just beyond reach. There is something many people never discover. Love is not measured only by grand moments. Sometimes love is measured by what refuses to disappear after disappointment, after distance, after misunderstanding, after pride. If kindness still remains, if respect still remains, if hope still remains, then perhaps something beautiful has survived. But surviving is not the same as beginning again. Another truth is waiting. The heart often speaks softly, fear speaks loudly. Last night, fear finally grew tired, truth quietly stood up. That may be the most important part of this entire story. Not that someone confessed, not that someone waited, but that honesty became stronger than fear. Even if only for one night, even if only for one message. Still, another piece has yet to reveal itself. Think about the people who have crossed your own path. Some stayed, some left, some taught you joy, others taught you strength. Every encounter shaped who you are today. Perhaps that is why certain names still stir something deep inside you, not because you are trapped in the past. Because the heart remembers lessons long after the calendar moves on, and one lesson from this story is only beginning to unfold. The person who confessed their feelings eventually placed the phone face down, not in defeat, not in anger, in surrender. There comes a moment when love stops trying to control the outcome. It simply becomes honest. That honesty is peaceful, not because every wish comes true, because nothing false remains. That peace settled over the room like gentle morning light. Still, one unanswered question continued quietly breathing beneath it all. Will honesty be met with honesty? The answer has not arrived. Hours later, the phone finally moved. Just a single vibration. One gentle sound. Nothing more. The heartbeat quickened. Hands trembled, eyes closed for one brief second. Should they look? Should they wait? Would this small moment carry joy? Would it carry closure? Would it carry another question instead of an answer? No one knew, not even the heart holding the phone. Because sometimes opening a message feels like opening an entirely new life. Another layer. The screen slowly brightened. Only a few words appeared. Not enough to explain everything. Not enough to erase every tear. Not enough to rebuild every bridge. But enough to keep the story alive. Enough to let hope breathe one more time. Enough to remind two weary hearts that kindness had not disappeared. Yet those words remain unseen. Not because they are being hidden from you, but because their deepest meaning belongs to the next part of this journey. For now, hold on to this quiet thought. Some truths arrive late. Some apologies travel slowly. Some hearts need time before they remember how to trust again. And sometimes, the greatest miracle is not hearing the words you hoped for. It is discovering that hope itself never truly left. The story has not reached its ending. It has only stepped into a deeper silence. And somewhere beyond that silence, another message is already waiting to be opened. The screen stayed lit in the dark. One message. Then another pause. Then a breath so small it almost disappeared. That was the moment everything began to shift. Not because a grand answer arrived. Not because all pain was suddenly healed. But because the silence on the other side was no longer empty. It was alive. It was thinking. It was feeling. And sometimes, that is the most dangerous kind of silence. Another layer, the one who received the message did not answer right away. They read it once. Then again. Then a third time, slower than before. Every word found a place inside them. Every line touched an old wound they thought had already closed. They remembered the times they had waited for this honesty. The times they had stared at a screen, hoping a name would appear. The times they told themselves not to hope anymore. But hope has a way of returning when it is spoken to softly. The next breath, there was no anger first. That surprised them. There was sadness. Deep sadness. The kind that comes when a heart realizes it has been carrying two truths at once. They still cared. They had still cared. And that made the distance harder to explain. Because if the feeling never left, then what exactly had all the distance been for? That question did not answer itself. It only opened wider, "You'll understand soon," and that is where the night became sacred, because in the quiet after the message, the truth began to move in both directions. The sender was trembling with regret. The receiver was trembling with memory. One heart was asking for mercy. The other was asking for clarity. Neither one was wrong. Neither one was easy. This is how some stories begin again. Not with certainty. With a shared ache that finally has a name, another piece. Maybe you have lived long enough to know that real love does not always arrive neatly. Sometimes it arrives late. Sometimes it arrives after a season of silence. Sometimes it arrives only after both people have been taught what absence feels like. That does not make it fake. It makes it human. It makes it fragile. It makes it brave enough to be honest when honesty hurts most. The biggest truth is still hidden. The reply, when it came, was not long. It did not need to be. It held more weight than 1,000 careful speeches. It said something simple. Something almost too simple. I did not stop feeling it either. That one line changed the air. Not because it solved everything. Because it proved something had survived. Something had stayed alive while time was trying to bury it. And once that is known, everything else becomes harder to hide. Another layer. There are moments when a heart knows it has entered a different room. You can feel it before the mind catches up. The same walls. The same body. The same night. Yet everything has changed. That is what happened here. Both hearts knew they were standing in front of a truth that could not be undone. And still, neither one rushed. They were too afraid to break what was finally real. The quiet held them both. You'll understand soon, the sender wrote again. This time with less fear. More truth. They admitted the thing they had been avoiding for far too long. They had not forgotten. Not even close. They had tried to replace a living feeling with routine. They had tried to make themselves smaller than the memory. They had tried to call it done when it was not done at all. And every attempt failed in the same way. The heart always remembered what the mind refused to admit. Another piece. The receiver sat still for a long time after reading that. Long enough to feel old pain rise and soften at the same time. Because being seen can hurt. And being seen too late can hurt in a different way. But being seen at all, that is what kept the room from becoming cold. They had wanted this honesty. They had prayed for it in one form or another. Yet now that it was here, They could feel the weight of all the lost time standing between the words and the heart. Another layer, there was one part neither person dared to say yet. What happens now? That question sat in the center of everything like a candle between two shadows. Do they move closer? Do they wait? Do they protect what remains by keeping it gentle? Or do they risk it all and speak the final sentence that could either heal or shatter the night? No one could answer that too quickly. The story was asking for patience, you'll understand soon, and then came the memory. Not loud. Not forced. Just one tiny detail that changed the whole mood. A place they once knew together. A small laugh shared in passing. A look that lasted 1 second too long. Old moments do not always return like storms. Sometimes they return like light through a cracked window. Soft. Warm. Uninvited. Impossible to ignore. That was the kind of memory moving through them now. Another piece. The sender had once believed that time would make the feeling weaken. But time did something else. It gave the feeling shape. It made the truth clearer. It stripped away excuses. It left behind only the part that mattered. And the part that mattered was this: they had not been waiting for perfection. They had been waiting for courage. They had waited so long that courage nearly became grief. But last night, grief and courage finally met. The biggest truth is still hidden. The receiver knew this too, even if only in pieces. They knew that people do not always leave because they stop caring. Sometimes they leave because they care too much and do not know how to carry it. Sometimes fear makes the wrong choice look like the safe one. And sometimes, much later, the heart wakes up to what the fear cost it. That is not an excuse. It is just the honest shape of loss. And honesty, even now, was the only thing strong enough to keep this story alive. Another layer. The hours moved slowly after that. One message became two. Two became many. Not dramatic. Not perfect. Just real. There were pauses between them. Soft questions. Small confessions. Careful words that trembled before they landed. No one wanted to rush the wound. No one wanted to touch the ache too hard. They were both learning something simple and hard at the same time. Truth is tender when it first returns, the next breath, and maybe that is why this moment feels so close to your own life. Because everyone knows what it means to wait for a sign. Everyone knows the feeling of almost being chosen. Almost being understood. Almost being loved out loud. That word, almost, has broken many hearts. But it has also protected them long enough for the right truth to come back in the right time. And now this story stands in that narrow space between fear and grace. You'll understand soon. There is something else they did not say at first. Not because it was untrue. Because it was too vulnerable. They admitted that they had feared your silence. Not your voice. Your silence. They wondered if it meant you had moved on. They wondered if you had stopped believing in them. They wondered if the last open door had quietly closed without a sound. Those fears sat inside them like stones. Heavy. Cold. Still. But last night, one small line loosened them, another piece. The line was this: I still think about you when everything gets quiet. That sentence did not shout. It did not ask for a miracle. It did not promise forever. But it said enough. It said the feeling had not died in the dark. It said the heart was still connected to something it had never fully released. It said the truth had waited through every season and survived anyway. And once that was spoken, there was no pretending left. Another layer. You can almost feel the shift now. The story is no longer asking whether love existed. It is asking whether love can survive the weight of delay. That is a very different question. A deeper one. A more painful one. Because love may be real and still arrive with shaking hands. Love may be honest and still not know where to stand. Love may be alive and still need time to learn how to walk again. The biggest truth is still hidden. The receiver finally answered with a question of their own. Not a harsh one. A careful one. Why now? 2 words. So small. So powerful. That question held everything that had been buried. Why now, after the silence? Why now, after the distance? Why now, after all the moments that were left empty? It was not a demand. It was a doorway. And behind that doorway stood the thing both hearts feared most, another layer. The sender took longer this time. The pause stretched. The room grew quieter. The phone stayed warm in a hand that could barely hold it. And then, at last, the answer came. Not perfect. Not polished. Just true. They said they had reached the place where pretending no longer worked. They said they had become tired of living as if the heart could be edited. They said your name had kept returning, even when they begged it not to. That is when they knew the silence had failed them. You'll understand soon. There is a kind of surrender that feels like falling and healing at the same time. That is what this looked like. A person finally laying down the performance. A heart finally admitting it was still wounded by what it had lost. A soul finally choosing honesty over comfort. And yet, even this was not the final turn. Because being honest does not instantly solve the fear of being too late. That fear still stood there, waiting, another piece. Maybe you have felt that fear too. The fear that one day the truth will arrive after the moment to receive it is already gone. The fear that the thing you needed most will come with perfect timing for the wrong season. If so, you know why this night matters. Because it is not only about love. It is about timing meeting truth, and whether they can survive each other without breaking apart. The next breath, the two hearts did not know what the next day would bring. That part was still hidden. But they did know something had changed forever. They were no longer speaking to the memory of each other. They were speaking to the living truth. And that truth was shaking both of them in ways neither expected. There is power in that kind of moment. Quiet power. The kind that does not announce itself. The kind that changes the air without asking permission. Another layer.